What's going on, FA Nation? Welcome back. This is the Fantasy Alarm NASCAR DFS podcast. This week we are previewing Vegas' first mile-and-a-half intermediate track of the season. No more drafting, but we got to hand it to Atlanta, especially after the horrible crap we had to watch. If you played the Truck and Xfinity Series races on Saturday, the Cup Series delivered probably the best race of the next-gen era, and this is after 2 years of some questionable decision-making by people wondering why they tore down old Atlanta. But if new Atlanta is going to deliver races like that going forward, then we're in for a treat. But, I mean, we've had 5 races in the Cup Series at New Atlanta. One of them was awesome. It was unbelievable, fantastic finish. Congratulations to Daniel Suarez. But what were your thoughts on Sunday's race?
It was electric. Like, you could not take your eyes off the screen until they started showing commercials and then got cautions every time. I mean, it started on lap 2 with a 16-car pileup, right? And you're going, oh, great. It's just
like here we go. Like it's just the same.
And like it continued, but it was mainly just 2-car wrecks. I will say it was pretty impressive late. Who the heck spun out in the middle of the track and didn't take anybody else with them? I'm trying to remember who it was, but they got loose and spun out in the middle of a 3-wide and nobody else got damaged. So that was pretty impressive. That finish was amazing. Just flat out just amazing.
And it's awesome to see Suarez get the win out of those 3 guys. I don't have an issue with any of those 3 getting the win. I know people are actively always rooting against Kyle Busch. I find him an endearing character. But Daniel Suarez is easily one of the more likable guys in the entire series. And it's just second career win, second win coming in the next gen car. Especially
arguably
when they're
a seat-saving win.
Yeah, because there have been the rumblings that we didn't know how long he would stay at Trackhouse if he wasn't.
I mean, they have don't they have Carson Hocevar?
Yeah, he's moving over to Trackhouse next year.
He's technically in Trackhouse. He's just in a third car that's being fronted by
Spire.
Spire, who somehow still has cars to put on track. I thought they sold everything, but apparently not. Just amazing.
I think when you consider it also, like, the race just had everything you wanted. Like, yes, it was drafting an intermediate. You had wrecks. You could pass, especially for the lead. We didn't get the long single file runs. We were getting 4 wide, like, multiple times. They were comfortably driving around 3 wide on a track that's only about 40 feet wide. And so, like, it just had, 47 lead changes at the end of the day when it was all said and done?
I think so. It was a new record for Atlanta. I think it set the record with 10 or 11 laps to go, which were going to be crazy because, last 10 laps coming at a plate track, always nuts. It had pit strategy. It had just everything you could possibly want. It had comers and goers. And like you said, you could pass basically anywhere you wanted to, except for Martin Truex, who basically stuck to the bottom of the track the entire day. But yeah, that was impressive. Now, I won't necessarily say it was better than Kansas last year, because the first Kansas race last year was just amazing for an intermediate with no drafting, no nuts, or no artificially close racing because of the plate racing. Kansas put on an absolute show last year. Unfortunately, Vegas is not known for these types of shows, which is where we go this week. Maybe on the Strip.
Well, you say unfortunately. You say unfortunately like it's a bad thing. I think the only unfortunate thing is that Vegas has to try and follow up last week's race, and we know it probably won't.
Right. I mean, there's been good races at Vegas.
Yeah.
But is it Atlanta level from last week? No.
Well, I think for the
level, no.
But for the purposes of this podcast, we're previewing it from a DFS perspective. This is where the NASCAR DFS season gets started because we have practice. Practice matters this week. We really want to like last week. Yeah, we targeted the dominators. We wanted to get those laps led at Atlanta. They went to almost everybody in the field. But for this race, we're hoping to nail the 2 or the 3 dominators in our lineup. We're hoping to get 6 guys that finish and score very well. Hoping to avoid the chalk bombs. But this is the first race where it feels like we can strategize for our NASCAR DFS lineups. We're not throwing darts, for the drafting tracks and leaving salary on the table. Like this is where the NASCAR DFS season officially begins.
Correct. Yeah. So we got a little bit of a taste of an intermediate last week with Atlanta. It was still much more drafting style like Daytona, but it was size-wise intermediate. But we have the full intermediate package on the cars this week. It's the first chance we get to see the new bodies in a non-drafting setup, so that'll be key to watch at practice. That's the number one thing I'm watching for at practice on Saturday is how the new bodies look, because in the aero package of the plate tracks, it doesn't really, like, you're not going with horsepower. The aero doesn't necessarily matter quite as much because everybody basically has the same stuff under the hood, right? And you're in a pack. So generally speaking, the aero is not going to matter that much. Now, you're going to get a lot of single file racing. You're going to have to make single car passes on either the inside or the outside. You're going to have the aero on the car to make those moves, and just how loose or tight do they show up, whatnot. Now, I will say we do have some weather this weekend.
Not in the rain, desert?
Not rain.
Wind.
High wind warnings are possible. So we'll have to pay attention if it delays anything, because, there is sand, there is stuff that can be blown about and putting the cars on track. With tremendous amounts of wind going on is probably not the safest thing, because, you don't want a car catching a stray breeze on the wrong part of the car and get blown into the wall, and it's nothing anybody could do about it except maybe not be on the track at the time. So we'll have to pay attention to that. We do get a triple header weekend this weekend?
Trucks Friday night. The early preview of that is pretty much done. I'll have updates once we know the starting order. It's just we won't really have – they're not going to finish qualifying until about 6 p.m. Eastern, and then the race goes green, I think, around 9:15 p.m. Eastern. So it's a late one, but I remember last year's truck race at Vegas being very profitable, and then we get Xfinity Series on Saturday, and then, Cup to wrap it up on Sunday. But, This is where I start throwing a little more bankroll at these races.
When's the last time we had 3 triple header weekends to start the season?
I don't know. I know it hasn't happened in a while, because I know typically the trucks – actually, no, that's not true. They did race
did they do it last year?
It may have been because the schedule was different, but the thing that's different about this year is that we started with Daytona and Atlanta. Typically, it's been Daytona to start, and then they had West to Auto Club, but I don't think the trucks ran Auto Club last year.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's the thing. So, we get another triple header. Those of you interested in F1, that starts this weekend in Bahrain. Not talking about that here, though. We're going to stick with Vegas. So it's a 1.5 mile track. It's pretty decently steeped for a mile, sloped for a 1.5 mile track.
Compares closest to Kansas, correct?
Yeah, but it's even more steep than Kansas. I think the comparison is better in the opposite direction, in terms of how steep it is. What does that do for us? Well, it kind of makes passing a little tougher here. Track position is king at Vegas. You will hear the driver say it all day, all night, depending on when they're on track and being interviewed. So, you want your guy, if you want to have a shot at winning, you almost definitely have to start in the top 10. Winners rarely come from outside the top 10 here unless absolute chaos happens or they just nail the pit strategy and get perfect timed caution, right? Laps led leaders are almost assuredly coming from inside the top 10. And passing can be tough. Now, can you pass further back in the pack? Yes. But once you get to the top 10, it becomes tougher to pass here because cars in the top 10 can be a little bit more spread out than those further back in the pack. So, in terms of an action-packed race, little less. In terms of more predictability and DFS strategy, a lot more this week for Vegas and the Pennzoil 400.
What would you say about tire wear?
We were talking about this a little earlier, right? That it was that like I think it's probably towards the higher end now.
Yeah, it's not a super old surface, but
it gets beat up pretty well in that sun.
Yeah, like it's not getting any younger, and
no,
it's got moderate tire wear.
Yeah. It's not as abrasive as Darlington or Homestead, but it is more so than I would say Kansas. So it's probably third or fourth in line.
Okay,
I would say for tire wear among the ovals. Now that Auto Club is no more, and and old Atlanta has been repaved, and now even Sonoma got repaved. They repaved the whole thing of Sonoma too.
And then here we are on the West Coast swing, and we're left wondering how they didn't get Sonoma on the schedule. And I get that it's hard for teams because they would essentially have to bring, your intermediate package cars and your road course car. Like that I get logistically, but Sonoma right now looks amazing. The track is
gorgeous. It's all
the grass is green. It's not burnt.
Yeah, it looks phenomenal. So at some point I would be fine with swapping out Vegas for Sonoma. Like it's tricky because I don't know how you get Phoenix in there too. I get it. It's a tough spot, but yeah. So how are you looking at builds this week, Dan?
What do we have? 267 laps just about for this one?
Yep. 1.5 miles, 400 miles, 267 scheduled laps.
Just quick math, and we're probably going to get between 160, 170 Dominator points. It's going to be most of my laps are going to be 2 Dominator built-in cash games. I'm pretty sure I'm going to settle on cash games. I will go with 1 Dominator and hoping that there's a guy that starts on the pole or the front row that I think can just take advantage of the clean air early on, get the early laps led, and score a top 5 to top 10 finish, if not the win. And then from there,
this race to back that up, this race last year, Byron started second, led 176 laps. Larson started 6th, led 63, and finished second. Byron won. So 239 laps led by 2 drivers out of the.
And that's the spring race, correct?
Correct. I did not look at the playoff race.
I'm pulling it up. Okay, here we go. Perfect. Kyle Larson started P2, won the race, led 133 laps. Christopher Bell started on the pole, finished second as the runner-up. So the 2 guys that started on the front row both finished on the front row. Bell led 61 laps with 39 fastest laps. Larson led 133 laps with 67 fastest laps.
So pretty much a carbon copy. The spring race in 2022, which was the first one run here with the next-gen car. That one was a little bit more split up in terms of laps led. You didn't have
I also think
over 100.
We also didn't really know what to expect at that time with the next-gen car.
Correct, because also if you look at it, like Kyle Busch started 37th and finished 4th. Doesn't happen very often in Vegas. Yeah. Chastain started 18th, finished 3rd, and led the most laps at 83. So if memory serves, that was a massive tire blowing race. Like guys had trouble with tires.
Yeah.
Like that whole race. So we can basically wipe out the first one here. And the second one, they didn't much fix the tires either because let's see, Chastain started 11th, led 68 laps, finished second. But your point about two Dominators is the way that I'm looking at this too.
And that's how I'm approaching most of my tournament builds. I may mix in another driver that's maybe starting in the top 10, maybe a guy that's in the 7 to 8K range as maybe a tertiary Dominator and just hope that he can get a good finish. as well as some laps led as well. But for cash games, I'm not going to go primarily for position differential. I will want to get probably someone from the front row and hope that I nail the guy that can go out and lead some laps, and then get 5 other guys that are of good value, offering PD and finish well and score well. So that's going to be my approach. Obviously, we are ways away from practicing and qualifying to know who's fast, but early on Thursday night at 10:30 on the East Coast, that's, I guess, a quick look at how I'm approaching lineup building this week. And also, I know we don't see a lot in the next gen car, but I may have, if I'm making 20 lineups, 2 or 3 of them might be solo dominator builds, and maybe hope that I can get one guy that goes out and leads 150 plus laps and wins.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with it. I mean, look, if you missed on Larson in this race last year, it probably didn't kill you that badly. I mean, 63 laps is nice, but 176 from Byron, missing out on that would have killed you.
Yeah.
Almost assuredly in tournaments. By the way, the next closest to Larson's 63 was Denny Hamlin's 10. He started 12th, finished 11th, and led 10 laps in between. Joey Logano started on the pole last year in this race, led 9 laps, wrecked out because it's Logano.
I guess, I mean, if we're going to discuss a few drivers, why not just lead off with Kyle Larson?
Yeah. Larson has been very, very good here.
According to the sports books, he's got a ton of win equity.
Yes. So we're only looking at the 4 next gen car races, right? So it is a smaller sample that we're looking at this week. We could go a little further back. But Larson, if you look at his average finish, is 10th. So it doesn't seem like it's that great, right? Until you actually figure out that, the 10th is because he finished 35th in one of the races. The other 3, he finished second, and first. So he's been really, really good at Vegas. 1.5 miles are where Larson shows up to dominate, like most Hendrick cars. In fact, in the 4 races run in the next gen era at Vegas, Hendrick has 3 of the wins. Bowman has a win, Byron has a win, and Larson has a win, and then Logano has the other one.
That's kind of similar to Atlanta.
Yeah. Gee, they're both 1.5 miles. They're pretty quick. So it's hard not to start with Larson. He's going to be, again, it's going to depend on where he starts, but I feel pretty confident in saying he's going to be the highest played top tier driver on both sides.
Are you okay still eating that chalk, or do you think that this is potentially leverage to be underweight?
I think there is leverage in certain builds. Like, obviously, I'm not going 100% Larson.
Sure.
Right? I could see the argument for, instead of going 40-45% Larson, to go 30% Larson and let other people, and then that way, if he does have that 35th place finish, or simply doesn't lead the most laps, then you have leverage over the field and some salary to do some fun things with. Because if you put Larson in your lineup on DraftKings, you immediately lose $500 on your average driver spot. Right? He's 11,000 on DK. So
I still don't think. I think it's just early enough in the year where $11,000, when we know what he can do at a track like this, is probably a discount. Like, we're going to get to a point in the season where some of these guys are going to be, priced up to 12,000, maybe 12.5. We really don't see egregious pricing in the Cup Series races like we'll see for, Kyle Busch in some Truck Series races. Like, Kyle Busch, I think, for the Truck Series race in Vegas is like 14.5. And so he needs 75 fantasy points to even pay off that salary. And so there's an argument from a pricing perspective just to fade Kyle Busch on DraftKings for Friday night's Truck Series.
Kyle Larson is $100 cheaper on DraftKings this year than he was in this race last year.
Yeah, and so like
now, granted, there was
it's kind of like go ahead.
We had seen him at Auto Club prior to this race last year, right? They didn't do Auto Club this year, so that changes things a little bit. But he was 11-1 in this race a year ago on DK. He was 13-5 on FanDuel. So the 11 grand is technically a discount.
Who else do you like in the 10K range or above? Because I feel like there are guys that I like, and there's one driver who I really didn't even like come onto until about yesterday. But Christopher Bell is kind of jumping off the page as maybe my second favorite play on this slate, especially if the new body for the Toyotas like really shows up and runs well in this track.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with Christopher Bell. By the way, C-Bell did get a big bump compared to this race last year on DK. If we want to keep this trend going of what they were last year, he was 8,800 in this race a year ago, and he's 9,500 this year. C-Bell has been solid here. He's not been huge, right? Obviously, he finished runner-up to Kyle Larson in the last race here. He did finish 5th last spring, so that's pretty solid. And arguably, Bell had the faster car last fall. Had the race gone another maybe 2 laps, he probably would have caught Larson in that rundown. Larson was blocking him for all that he was worth last fall. So I don't mind C-Bell. And by the way, he finished 10th in the first race here, but we're taking that with a little bit of grain of salt because there were some crazy moves that happened with tires blowing and whatnot. The guy that's really catching my eye right now, a little lower down, is Ross Chastain at $9,100.
I can get that. Yeah.
Chastain has 4 top 5s here. Granted, we're kind of discounting the first one, right? But he's had 2 straight top 5s, just like C-Bell. He's looked fast. He finished 7th last week in Atlanta. Was in position to win at the Daytona 500. Just kind of misjudged the gap with like a lap to go. So I don't have a problem with Ross Chastain. He's been quick. He's been quick here. And again, keeping that little trend going for whatever it's worth. I'm not saying it's like a magical elixir to find value, but he was 10 grand in this race on DK last year. He's 9,100.
Yeah, and the thing is like Trackhouse as a team seems like poised for 3 to 4 wins every year, and Ross Chastain seems like almost like he'll get 2 wins every year, which is kind of been the case the last couple of years in the next gen era. And I wouldn't really put it past him to potentially get a win here because, as you said, he's finished top 5 3 of the 4 Cup Series races here in the next gen car. Led 151 laps between the 2 2022 races. That was just a phenomenal year for him in general. I can't really. He did win Nashville last year. Would you give a lot of track comparison between Nashville and Las Vegas? I know Nashville is only 1.33 miles, but similar shape.
Similarly hard to pass.
Yeah.
There. The concrete surface is a little bit more abrasive and slick than your standard 1.5 miles. So yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's certainly not a polar opposite track. There is definitely comparison there. I'm not saying it's a sister track, but there is things we can take from it. Plus the fact that Chastain's just been really quite good here. I mean, over the last 4 races, we talk about how good Byron's been and how good Larson's been and how good, Kyle Busch has been at his home track. Chastain has a better average finish than all of them.
Yeah.
So, not that average finish is everything, but when you look at average run position in those races, Ross Chastain is second, only behind William Byron. So it's not just that he's getting the average finishes and they're coming late. It's that he's running there and putting together complete races here. So there's some credence to just how well he's been performing here. He's also second in average driver rating, also behind William Byron. So on that note, we can also take a little bit of a discount off of Kyle Larson and look at William Byron. I mean, I don't see a reason not to.
Yeah, well, I just feel like he's put himself just in this tier, not necessarily by himself, but it's just like we've just seen in the last couple of years that like you can kind of feel good about playing Byron on any track. I get that, like prior to his Daytona 500 win, he had racked in like 5 or 6 Daytona 500s, but that didn't mean he didn't have a Daytona win on his resume previously. He won the season finale at Daytona.
Right, he locked himself into the playoffs.
Yeah,
a couple of years ago with that win. Yeah,
and he's won on short tracks. He's won on intermediates. He might have a road course.
I'm pretty sure he won Watkins Glen.
Yes, I actually think you're right as well. So it's like he's just becoming this young driver on a good team that can win at any track. And so it's not that I don't like Byron. I just I get why we hype up Larson because, basically how the sports books and everything are trending. And
not to mention the talent is,
correct.
He is the most talented driver on the planet right now.
Yeah. But like Byron's just a guy who's like, yeah, like I don't care where he starts. I just think like you can just play him on almost any track at this point.
I would agree with that. I would also say that Byron is second on the pecking order for Hendrick in terms of equipment and setup and whatnot. I think Byron is second.
Yeah, it's probably Larson, Byron, Elliott, Byron.
Yeah, I think Bowman is the fourth guy.
Yeah.
In that stable right now. So in terms of, getting the equipment needed to do well, I would say Byron is right there. If we're looking at the mid-tier, there are some interesting names here.
There are interesting names.
That I could go like a lot of different places on.
You really could. And we're going to get like so many of these drivers, especially the Toyotas, will get steamed up a bit, especially if they look good in practice and qualifying.
Correct.
Like Reddick is a guy who has led laps here in the past. I think with RCR, he grabbed the top 5 here back in 2022. Bubba, great at Kansas, and he was good on this track last year. And he's currently the points leader, I believe. Maybe that's Kyle Busch. But Bubba's coming off back-to-back top 5s.
I think it's Kyle Busch, but Bubba's close.
I don't hate Ty Gibbs. I don't hate. Maybe I'm not as excited about Eric Jones this week, but like I'm intrigued with what Michael McDowell, the new Ford body, and that Team Penske line. It's like this mid range is so fascinating. We know who's going to be good up top, but like the mid range is like we're going to see what the Ford and Toyota bodies look like, and what can front row with McDowell and Gilliland do with the Penske lines. Like there's just a lot to watch.
Yeah. Also, I love that DraftKings can't separate Buescher and Keselowski ever.
Well, they can't.
Like they're always
separate Reddick and Wallace.
They're always like right next to each other. Yeah, I mean same thing with Reddick and Wallace, but like
I don't get why Keselowski's more expensive than Buescher.
Because he's got the name.
I get,
and theoretically he's the owner, so he would have better equipment, I guess, because he's the co-owner of the team.
But he's now gone.
But Buescher has
races without a win.
I know, but Kez also got more top 10s than Buescher last year too. I mean, Buescher got the wins, but Keselowski had a couple more top 10s, so he was arguably more consistent the entire season. We're splitting hairs, but clearly DraftKings is doing the same thing when they're pricing people because they're as close as you can be in their pricing model that jumps by $200. So, I would say the only one in the, like even Bowman is interesting. Like I know we just crapped on him and called him the fourth guy at Hendrick, but the fourth guy at Hendrick is.
Do you know how many guys? Do you know how many guys in this series would kill to be the fourth guy at Hendrick?
Everybody at SHR.
Yeah. Corey LaJoy, Austin Dillon.
Right. Austin Dillon's got to worry about leading more laps than Todd Gilliland first. Did you see that stat, by the way? That Todd Gilliland's 74 laps led this year is more than the
Austin Dillon in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not been very good. But I mean, Bowman has an average finish of 13th here. Granted, it's in 3 races because he missed one with the broken back last year from the sprint car accident. But in the 3 races, he's won one, finished third in another, and then finished 35th because he had I think it was an accident, if I'm not mistaken. So that's not even that bad. So, like, even the guy that we're not terribly high on hasn't exactly done poorly here. I will say that 2 dudes at the bottom of this list, Austin Dillon and Austin Cindric, are going to need to show me things before I feel at all interested, I guess, in playing them.
Do you know how bad it's gotten at SHR? All their drivers are priced between $6,000 and $6,400.
Yeah, it's not good. I mean, Briscoe, Gragson, Barry. It's not. Yeah, that's
what happened to that team.
They got young.
Not well.
I mean, not all that. I mean, Josh Berry's like 32, so it's not even like it's that young. I mean, they've been struggling for a while. Kevin Harvick made them look good because he's Kevin Harvick and a Hall of Fame driver and whatnot. But, like, I mean, Briscoe hasn't been good basically his entire time. I mean, he won Phoenix, right? And then
2 years ago, and then did nothing since.
Right, just like Austin Cindric won his first Cup race, and then hasn't done jack squat since. Ryan Preece got sent down to Xfinity in between and is back and still hasn't done anything. So, not great. We're gonna have to be careful in the budget, the value tier. Obviously, we always have to be, but the last 2 weeks we've been a little bit.
What are you talking about? You don't want to go back to Daniel Hemrick for the 3rd straight week where he can get you another top 20?
I mean, maybe. I mean, not out of the realm of possibility, to be honest.
Here's the thing. Derek Kraus is making his Cup Series debut for Kaulig Racing. Where do you stand on the debate between playing Justin Haley and Rick Ware Racing Equipment or Derek Kraus in his Cup Series debut with Kaulig Racing? First time driving the next-gen car.
Probably play Haley.
I also would go Haley, I think.
I mean, it's Rick Ware, and it hasn't been great.
Mm-mm.
But Justin Haley kind of makes up for that.
Yeah.
I mean, the car hasn't come off the track in 2 weeks, so that's good news. Right? I mean, this is an incredibly low bar to clear. Right. I mean, Hemrick is not terrible.
Well, the first 2 races were drafting tracks, and I was more than happy to play him in that style of race.
He finished 22nd here in his race, in the only race he's run here.
I guess the thing going for Hemrick is that he's 5,500. He's always going to qualify outside the top 25, a lot of times outside the top 30. And yet, as bad as he is, the equipment is still fine, and he can still get a top 20.
Correct.
But that's – and if honestly, like if he's averaging – if he's getting, 33 fantasy points, that's 6x value at his price tag.
Yeah, so that's a good transition here. We do need to talk about value this week. It's been a little skewed the last 2 weeks because of plate racing and position differential. And at Daytona, we didn't really chase lap sled dominators because there aren't really any. In Atlanta, we kind of did, but kind of didn't because of this week, for GPPs, you need guys that can hit 6X.
Yeah.
You're going to need guys who can get you 6x value for GPP builds. If you're doing cash, which you can do here, you need 5x guys. You can, depending on how the laps led go, if you have the secondary laps led dominator, and then some decent position differential plays, you can do just fine in cash here.
Yeah.
But for GPPs, you're going to absolutely have to have the laps led dominator to be anywhere close to the money for GPPs. And then you're probably going to need all 6 guys to finish because there's not going to be chaos here like there was. I mean, hell, last week it was easier for Fox to tell you the guys that weren't involved in wrecks than the guys that were involved in wrecks. That's not going to be the case this week. It's going to be a lot of single file. You know, field's going to get stretched out until a caution happens or stage break comes. So you are going to need 5x at least for cash games, and for GPPs, you're definitely going to need 6x. So for a guy like Larson, he's going to have to put up like 66 points.
Yeah, and he can do it.
He can. I'm not
easily.
I'm not that concerned about it. You know, we haven't seen him do it this year, but again, he was starting way too close to the front to do that, to be honest. I mean, Daniel Suarez put up, 70-something points last week on DK? 72? Took 22 spots of PD to get that far. So, because again, he didn't really lead. He led single-digit laps at the end of that race. So just keep that in mind when you're building. We got to kind of visualize guys who have paths to that, and watch out, because I may either on Discord or my Twitter account put out a chart of where guys need to finish and what they need to do in order to reach 5 and 6x.
There you go.
So, and it'll include some, laps led dominator points if they need it, because obviously if Larson starts on the pole and wins the race, he's going to need like 25 dominator points to get to the 66 points. So, and when we're talking value, we mainly mean on DraftKings, because FanDuel, the value calculations are so skewed because the laps completed.
It's just so easy to build lineups on FanDuel.
It generally, but there's also a skill, because it's that easy, but you also kind of have to get creative because it's that easy. You can't fall on the same line. Like, it's
because the margin. Yeah. Because how they reward points for, you get a 1/10 of a point for completing the lap, but you also get a 1/10 of a point if you have the guy leading all the laps, and so from there it's a razor thin margin that you're trying to nail the perfect lineup by.
It's also easier to dupe lineups on FanDuel because of the pricing and the way the scoring breaks down, and you only need 5.
A great way to get different on FanDuel is just to leave money on the table. And not a ton. Correct. Like, for a race like this, I probably wouldn't leave more than maybe $3,000. I wanted to go a little more conservative and say $2,000, but I think for a race like this, if I wanted to build unique lineups, 150 of them at most, I'd probably leave $3,000 on the table.
Yeah, let's just, for curiosity here, let's look at a FanDuel build. So if we Larson is $14,000 on FanDuel. So if we want to get creative, because here's another way you can get creative, is you don't go with Larson, you go with Byron, who's 13,500, right? You still get a guy we like and leave some money on the table. Now we can look at Ross Chastain for $9,000. It's we don't even have to dig that deep, because your average driver on FanDuel is $10,000. Well, Chase Elliott is $10,000. So Chase Elliott is the average cost. On DK, Chase Elliott is $1,500 more than average slot value for a driver. So this is what we're kind of talking about here. I don't know, if you want to get wonky and you like Alex Bowman, you could go with him. He's $8,000. And what do we have? We got 97.50 left per position. So nobody's really. We'll go with C-Bell. We really quite like C-Bell. I got $7,500 left, which, by the way, gets you Daniel Suarez if you want to max it out. But if you want to leave like $3,000 on the table, how about a guy that you wanted to talk about? We'll punch in Noah Gragson.
No Gragson.
That leaves $2,300 on the table, and it's kind of a wonky one, but you don't have to go dumpster diving into the $2,500 range. I mean, you could if you wanted Larson and Hamlin and Byron, then you'd have to go down into the $2,500 range. But yeah, I do think that Gragson's a sneaky play. I'll agree with you there in the budget.
The thing I liked about it is that, we talk about how rookies can be risky entering the next gen era for the first time. And we'll wrap this podcast up shortly. But Gragson is not a rookie. He raced in this car last year for Legacy, had a miserable season, became grumpier and grumpier as the year went on, and ultimately got fired for a social media post that he liked. But he's not a rookie. He has experience in the car. He's from Vegas. We know that the Ford bodies are different to contend. SHR, sure, they suck. But I still buy into the narrative that he's a good driver, a good young driver with upside on a track that he's very familiar with. And as we discussed, this is a more moderate tire wear track, and he had a ton of success at tracks like Darlington and Homestead in the Xfinity Series. And so if he starts deep in the field, and I don't think that there's going to be a ton of ownership that flocks to him, I will aim to be overweight on him. And I don't even think it's going to take that much to be overweight on the kid.
By the way, I'll one up that. I don't even think we need him to start deep in the field. I think if he starts midfield, he's totally playable, because he started 17th here 2 races ago and finished 11th. And I think if he starts 17th, he's going to be overlooked because people aren't going to think he can hold a spot, or people are going to want, hey, if say for sake of argument, Corey LaJoie starts 30th.
Yeah.
And Gragson is 17th. I think LaJoie gets more look because he has
easily
upside, but he doesn't necessarily have the value upside that Gragson does. Because if Gragson finishes 15th, but LaJoie moves up, let's say 8 spots, you're getting more points from Gragson for the finish position than LaJoie, and LaJoie's PD doesn't make up for the gap in finish position. So, and you've spent less money because Gragson's cheaper. So, I think that's a clever spot. Daniel Hemrick's not so bad.
He can't do it 3 weeks in a row. Let's be honest. There's no way.
So we'll finish this up pretty quick here, but some bets that we were talking about before we started recording. Larson's the favorite. The best odds, the longest odds you can get as of right now. This is at 11 p.m. Eastern on Thursday night. Plus 450 on DK are the longest odds. So the last couple of weeks I've been telling you how your betting favorites for Daytona, Atlanta were going off at 10-1 or plus 1100, whatever. This is a normal race, and now you have Larson going off at plus 450. That's a normal favorite odds listing, especially with a guy with Larson's history at Vegas. Byron, big jump here, by the way. Byron is plus 900.
I don't necessarily hate that entirely.
I might take the longer return on a guy I think is about as equal to Larson as you can get here.
Yeah.
And double the return. That's a very intriguing, and he's plus 900 across multiple books. DK, BetMGM, little shorter at Caesars, and Bet Rivers. Christopher Bell, guy you brought up, the best odds you can find him at are 10-1 on DK to win. Chastain is plus 1400 to win. He's got 3 top.
That's not too bad. I actually do think I completely forgot about this, but I actually do have a bet on Chastain for this race.
It's not terrible. I don't hate it.
I got him at 16-1.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I was going to help you with that one. I completely forgot about that until now.
Here's the other thing. We're not really digging into long shots this week. These are not the
not for outrights
shots.
No,
10 to win. If you really like an odd, sprinkle a little bit, not like maybe 1/10 of a unit, 2/10 of a unit, right? But about the longest I feel comfortable going is inside of 30 to 1.
Yeah.
At an intermediate, because there's just not like the chaos that can reign supreme that gets, for example, you've got Ty Gibbs and Chris Buescher are 28 to 1. Then you've got Daniel Suarez, who, by the way, won last week. He's the next shortest odds at 66 to 1. Okay. Technically, Eric Jones at 60 to 1, which moved up. But then you've got Austin Cindric and Michael McDowell at 100 to 1. So there are big jumps when we, get to the back end. And Noah Gragson, who we really liked for a budget DFS play. This is why you don't bet like budget DFS plays.
150 to 1.
He's 250 to 1. So don't bet long shots here. It's not. I know Vegas is the betting capital, and everybody loves to hit the the roulette table. You get the 35 to 1 or 40 to 1 if your number hits. You're going shorter than that for the NASCAR race. Top 5. My favorite top 5 bet right now is plus 220 on Ross Chastain.
Nice.
I just don't get it. I don't get why you're getting such a good return on a guy who's had 3 top 5s in 4 races here. By the way, I used that logic last week for Daniel Suarez at plus 175 for a top 10. That hit. Top 10s are a little shorter this week. A lot of the guys are negative money, which isn't terrible. I don't have a problem betting negative. Don't bet Kyle Larson for a top 10. The best odds you're finding right now is the Bet Rivers for minus 345. That's like Verstappen to win odds in F1, and we still don't bet those.
Any final thoughts before we sign off for the night, Matt?
We'll have, we get practice on Saturday. We get qualifying Saturday for Cup. Races Sunday for Cup. You'll see playbook out. I'll have practice to qualifying table make an appearance in the playbook this year because we actually have practice that matters and qualifying that matters. Betting piece will be out Friday, which if you're listening to this, chances are the betting piece is pretty close to out, if not already out. And yeah, we'll give you all the strategy. I'll be around all weekend in Discord. So have fun. It's Vegas, baby.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck to you this week in Vegas, and best of luck to the FA Nation.
Best of luck, FA Nation.